What's up, gamers? Welcome to the Pinnacle Rio Major Roundtable. My name is Tickle, or Tickle if you don't understand my accent, and I'm going to be your host as we chat about the major and all the stuff that you can expect. I'm joined by three well-known voices in Counter-Strike. You've heard them, you've seen them. Hawker, B-Dog, and Yumi are here. And we've got the pro player perspective as well from NaToSaphiX. And I want to jump straight in because I was there when this happened. I think it's the big one. We've seen their faces on trains. Fallen and Fur, the Brazilian legends, last minute, extra time, third map, they qualify for the challenger stage. Imperial is going home, probably for us to say goodbye to them. And I mean, B-Dog, I'm going to throw it straight to you. After watching their performance at the RMR, are they going to go any further than the challenger stage, or do you think this is the end of the road or the end of the song for the last dance?
Well, look, it's a fairy tale story, right? It couldn't have been scripted any better, if you want to call it that way. The fact that they make it all the way through, it's the very last game, complexity take them to a very drawn out best of three, and they just make it. And it's there in Rio. It's the first time Brazil's got a major. All of the crowd has got the stages. I think the fact that they're in the show match as well, I think it kind of sets a lot of their expectations. I've got them personally going through because I just feel like they're going to have just enough to do it because they're going to have the entire morale, entire squad of Brazil behind them. And you've got some real new teams in this challenger stage. You've got young teams as well with the pressure and the environment. I feel like with the experience that Fallen has, especially, and I feel they can do it. I think it's just going to be similar to the RMR where they go down early and they'll have to battle back in to survive.
I mean, Hawker, do you think that Brazilian crowd does play a role for those teams that are going to be playing in front of the home crowd?
I always feel like it plays more of a role for the teams going up against them, especially like B-Dog was saying, with a lot of inexperienced teams here. I always think it's especially if you get to late in the game, which Imperial clearly were doing at the RMR consistently. That's the big question for me. I think if they can get maps close, that's when they're going to have the best chance of other teams struggling because, like B-Dog was saying, there's a few teams here that are probably the favorites to make it through that are actually really inexperienced on the major stage. And so that could definitely play a factor. The other thing that's really good for Imperial is you do get the feeling that players like Fallen are really hitting their peak, at least in terms of the last year or two. Fallen for a long time has just been mediocre as an AWPer, and he's finally fragging pretty well for this squad. And they've got Cello, who's been the main revelation. And then you've got Fur, who's always going to be good as an entry. So at least now they have the firepower where I can say it actually is possible. It's a team, I still think they're really on the border for me. I could see them making it. I could see them going out in heartbreak. It's a close one.
I mean, you mentioned some of the teams that were a little bit inexperienced. Which would those teams be for you that you think still potentially have a shot?
It's just a few, Mouse, for example, are the obvious one, where they've just got a bunch of players who I think 3 of their players literally haven't played at a major before, and yet they're clearly a pretty good team. So it's if you go to a really close game against Mouse and you get into 14-14, that's where I'm like, okay, Imperial actually have a pretty good shot. It's just a question of whether they can get there.
There's a lot of Brazilian teams and South American teams, NATO, that are coming into the mix. And I mean, we got to see them during the RMR, but I worry, and again, I was there, that maybe in that setting, when they were playing those North American teams, they were very strong. But when they start going up against some of the EU firepower, do you think they're going to be able to pull the same results?
I mean, my straight answer is going to be no. I think the North American scene, or just North American and the South American, the Americas in general, is weaker than the EU scene. But also, as you exactly mentioned, in terms of firepower and so on, these South American teams, they can definitely compete. But with the European teams, they have a much stronger base than most of the North American teams, for example, meaning that they are more easily able to shut down that kind of firepower advantage that they may be coming with, right? So I feel like for a lot of these younger South American teams, they seem to perform really well against the NA teams, but I personally am really interested to see some of the younger South American teams here at the challenger stage and see what are they able to do against a European team that has a more solid foundation, one that maybe will not leave as many gaps to be exploited, because I guess the kind of South American style is a little bit aggressive and try to find gaps and so on. And I think we will see less of that against the EU teams. So I think they will be struggling more, but I do still think that there are some of the teams that I still think will be making it, to the next stage.
Yeah, I also will say, I feel like it's kind of tough looking overall because at least in my head, there's probably like a good 7 teams, which I think are pretty likely to make it through. And then that means there's not much room for a lot of these other teams to work with, because I think there's a lot of really solid teams in this stage. And then it is going to kind of maybe come down to who do you get in that 2-2 match? Like that could really be what it comes down to for some of these teams.
I'd almost actually argue that this stage has probably the most variance out of all the teams. I know that there are teams that look good and like theoretically should be sort of lock-ins to the major cycle, but there's a lot of upset level teams as well. Like Big, I think, are still contenders, even with the fact that they've got a substitute. Bad News Eagles, super explosive. I mean, even the likes of IHC, I think, could take down someone like an EG or a 9Z or a 00 Nation. Like, some of those are going to be matchup dependent about whether they get through or not. This is probably the weirdest stage to call because of the fact there is variance, and there has also been teams that have done well at one event and then just dropped down the next event, especially when they move from like LAN to online stages. So it can be very awkward to like field which teams should and shouldn't go through. I'd actually argue there's probably only like 2 or 3 teams that are lock-ins. The rest are kind of wavy.
Who would be your lock-ins? I mean, Nato, jump in there, like add to the mix.
I'm just agreeing. Actually, I agree with basically everything that was said, but especially I really liked you mentioned IHC, because that's actually one of the teams I'm looking to see how well they will do. I'm not expecting them to go through to the next stage, but I think with some of the South American teams that we already mentioned, like 9Z and 00 Nation and so on, if they get paired up against IHC, I could honestly see IHC winning it, because mechanically they definitely have the skill level. They don't have the strong base that a lot of the EU teams will have, but they do have the firepower. And I think especially if it's early on in the best of ones, it really just comes down to who has the better day. So I really appreciate you for mentioning those, because I think they will be. They have the potential to be a surprise at this stage, in my eyes.
They are scarily the one team I feel like should do better than they actually will do at this event. Like, if you compare where they were last major to where they are now, they actually have more firepower but less structure, and I don't know how that's happened. And I assume it's just the AWP swap that they did with Annihilation and 9. They look a little bit more all over the place. So I have high expectations as well. But I also anticipate that they will underperform, even though the expectations aren't set very high for them. You know, like 1-2 wins, people will be like, good job, IHC, you played your part. But I'm scared that they will do worse than that.
B-Dog, you think IHC could be the upset in the challenger stage?
No. They'll get one win. I will never put them in my 0-3. That was a mistake people made last major. I feel like that's the mistake people were going to make this major. You put Greyhound in 0-3. Come on, guys. Like, it's pretty clear cut from boys. There. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to. Like, I quite like that roster. I just don't think that they've got enough, both structurally and mechanically. If you look at it just on the base value, if you're looking at teams that are going to be upsets potentially, I'd actually even throw 00 Nation into that equation, because I feel like you take a look at that roster and you've got Cold Zero, you've got Taco, like these are very like core names that have got all the experience. They're going to have the crowd behind them as well. And you take a look at the opening matchups, it's like Bad News Eagles versus 00 Nation. I could very well see, especially because Bad News Eagles, I know they always pull it out at the major. I know that they do well. They're a fan favorite. They went on that magical run last major cycle around, but I look at that opening matchup, and for me, 00 Nation just wins that best of one to kick things off.
Ooh.
I'm in agreement, to be honest. I think 00 Nation, I'll tell you the other team that I do think people should keep their eye on is 9Z, just because they caused huge amounts of upsets in the RMR. There's not a lot to go on in terms of prepping for them. I think maybe being in Brazil, no pressure, because, no one's expecting anything from you. They want the legends to win. Hawker, maybe that gives them the opportunity, maybe 1 or 2 wins at the start and then they fall away.
Yeah, it could happen. I do think with Bad News Eagles, I don't know. That matchup's kind of tough because I think it fully depends on whether Bad News Eagles like do feel pressure from the crowd, which actually could happen. Like they're one of the teams that maybe could have that happen, but then they just come across as a team that a lot of the times don't care almost. Like they just have crazy aimers. I watched Juan Flatro like push the same position like a few rounds in a row, and I'm just like, okay, this guy doesn't give a damn. This guy's gonna do whatever he wants. And then 0-0 Nation sometimes have a couple of their players go missing. Like, I really like Dumao as a player, but he's a player who I think thinks about the game a lot. And then sometimes I think can overthink the game. And then if he's having a bad game, he can struggle a bit. Cold Zero's been better, so that's good. But that's a real toss-up for me in the opening matchup. I do like that you brought up 9Z, though, because I remember first watching when they brought NQZ onto the lineup. And I could instantly tell that even though he's not super polished as an AWPer yet, he just has that ability where occasionally, like one in every, 10, 15 rounds, he'll just have one round where I watch him and I'm like, this guy actually has the ability to win rounds by himself. And he's like 17. Like he's a really exciting AWPer for the future.
Yeah.
And in the past, they had like one or two players on the team that were just really bad fraggers and just could not hang at tier 1. And I think they've managed to shift that out. I think they now just have one player who's not putting up a great rating, but they seem like they actually have some skill on that roster. So yeah, they're another one where I think they will get at least 1 or 2 wins here.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by 9Z. I mean, I remember saying it in the Pinnacle podcast for the RMR. I was like, I'm worried about NQZ. I'm worried about Buddha as well. And well, they really delivered. And I feel like when you've got a very solid core behind them, like Max, TZ, DGG, the fact that they are like been playing in this roster for such a long time and they will have their structure down. The fact that NQZ has been able to slot into this roster and has really delivered, that's such a good thing for 9Z, especially coming into the major cycle. And yeah, I am just pleasantly surprised to throw that in there because I know I was very anti 9Z in the previous podcast. So yeah, very happy
that's all you need to know. 9Z young AWPers, they love them. That's it.
Yeah.
They seem to just breed these guys.
This is fun, though. I mean, we're obviously talking about like the potential upsets, but the truth of it is, and I mean, Nato touched on it. I can't believe I'm going to say this. I feel bad. Sorry to everyone in South America and North America. I just don't know if they've got what it takes to fight the EU teams. I think when you take a look at this, there are names in this NATO that there's certain teams that are, in my opinion, they're the definite to go through. And I'd be curious, do you think that there are a selection of teams that you think are guaranteed they've got this?
I think there's one team that to me is like guaranteed, and obviously now saying it, it's potentially a caster curse or like a jinx here. No, I in my eyes, there's one team who I'm fully expecting to maybe not necessarily go 3-0 because I think that's always a little bit random, but I would be so surprised if they don't make it, and that's Cloud9. Those are a absolute lock-in for me. The only other I would have is Vitality, but I mean, the loss against Astralis, it is a little bit upsetting. I think they'll do, good. And I'm expecting them with, like, let's say 95% certainty to make the next stage, maybe even a little bit more. But for me, Cloud9, it is basically a 100%. Vitality, a little bit less. But those are kind of the two lock-ins for me. But yeah, other than that, I actually think it is quite open. I made a Pickem video, and there were so many teams where, for example, I didn't pick Evil Geniuses to go through, but it could happen realistically. And I didn't pick, I swear there was another one. Yeah, I know a lot of people have also picked maybe Gamer Legion to go through. I think that's also actually a potential with how they performed at the RMR. So there are so many teams where they would not be the obvious picks to me, but I still cannot discount them. I can't rule it out. I think the stage is so open, and that's part of only having two teams that are kind of locked in for me. The rest is just so open.
We'll get back to those two teams, which you mentioned, Evil Geniuses and Yomi. I did not have Evil Geniuses in the major, to be honest, when the RMR started. They surprised me. Did they surprise you?
Yeah, no, I mean, Evil Geniuses, I'm ready to just burn this entire roster, and I have been for many years, actually. So the fact that they made it, and they made a change that seemed to work out quite well. Like, I've really come to rate Nealon. I think even before he had much international experience, I think Nealon as a caller made sense because they didn't want to end up in a bidding war for more high-profile in-game leaders, and K23, his previous roster, seemed to be pretty consistent and had like a decent framework. So I like this team, but I was just scared that Breeze and Cirque would never come back, and they have in small ways. I think they've each had like separate games where they've really been on point, and Automatic as well has been like a good rock for this squad. I want to see these guys flourish in different rosters. Weirdly enough, but if they can make it work at in the major, then that's all fair dues to them. I think that they've made some. I wouldn't say easy roster moves to make, and they've been able to make it work within the North American.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, if you were literally just basing it off RMR results, like we were talking earlier about how maybe 9Z could get an upset here or there. EG, to make it here, they beat 9Z and they beat Furia. And I think a lot of people might have Furia going through this stage. So you just look at the RMR results and you're like, okay, this team actually has to be considered. I almost wonder whether they've been so much of a meme previously that people aren't actually looking at the recent results they've had, because the real surprise was that Cirque was actually playing pretty well at the NARMR. And if that happens, it makes such a big difference when you have a good AWPer on a team. It makes such a difference to the structure of the squad. And like Yumi was saying, I just hope they do well, because Automatic has been good for this team for so long, and he just deserves some results on this squad. Please let Automatic have some success, because he's really good.
Yeah, I feel like as well, Neelan, the fact that they went and got him was a really smart business decision, because although he hasn't got too much tier 1 experience, he really helped cultivate that entire K23 roster when they went on that massive run in the back end and the front end of 2021. And I'm just very impressed with the business decision to actually go for a type of IGL like Neelan, because it was bold. It was a very brave decision, but for the most part, in the short term, it is paying off.
I mean, so are we saying, do you see Evil Geniuses making it through to the Legend stage, B-Dog?
They're in my 3-0.
Oh my god!
Yeah, they're my 3-0.
I don't know how I feel about that. Okay, I mean, Nato, Evil Geniuses, do they make it through?
Well, I think it's a potential. Honestly, there are a few teams in this kind of part of the major where I feel like it's a little bit of a coin toss. Like if I was a betting man, there are some teams I would steer clear of, let's say, and I think Evil Geniuses for me would be one of them, because it's a little bit I don't know, a little bit too random. I like the more logic-based bets when I do my betting. But talking about Neelan, which is also one of the big win conditions for me, is like I've played with him. I've actually known him for a lot of years, and I've always seen him as a super nice guy, but also seen him as a really good IGL. And I think also he's one of those IGLs who actually bring quite a bit of firepower with him as well. And I think that's something that's really necessary, especially in the North American scene. Having an IGL who is also able to put numbers on the board makes it so that he doesn't get removed from the team. And we've seen a lot of, actually good North American IGLs who just have not been putting up numbers, and they've faded away, and now we have a scene that's basically lost with no one to lead. And I think that's another reason why this Neelan pickup is so smart. It's a sort of risk, but a calculated one, and I've always rated him highly, so I really like to see him with the success that they've had here at the RMR.
So it's fun to talk about the teams that are on the fence, like an Evil Geniuses. But I mean, I want to circle back to what Nato said earlier. Are we all in agreement that we think Cloud9 is a potential guaranteed going through, B-Dog?
Yeah, for sure.
Look at the shirt.
I'm going to wear the jersey.
Didn't have them 3-0 though. Didn't have them 3-0.
No.
Bro, you want to play the diamond coin game. You put the ones that are guaranteed in the bottom.
That's true. You got a point.
It's true. Yeah, I fully agree with NATO too, actually. I fully agree that I think Cloud9 are the ones where I look at them and I say, especially in this sort of Swiss system, like a group stage, they're so good in these sections of tournaments. The issues come when you get to playoffs, seemingly, or when you get to the big games, and then you're like, okay, now we've got to see if they can get past that, because that's what everyone's been waiting for. But they're almost certain for me to make it through this stage. Axile has been so good lately. He's been incredible as a rifler. And then the Vitality one, I think, is interesting, because when Spinks first joined this lineup, he was playing very well. and his recent form just seems to be slowly dipping down and down. And I was just so impressed when he first joined the lineup, because I think he's getting pretty bad spots on this team in a lot of positions. He's had to change things. So I was saying, oh my God, this guy's great. He's come in, he somehow continued to keep up his high level of fragging. And now I'm wondering whether that was just a honeymoon, because slowly it just seems to be getting a little worse and a little worse over time. And that's a shame, because if he was in good form, I think Vitality would be a real scary team here because of the form that ZywOo is in. Because I've said it earlier, I'm going to say it again, ZywOo is the best in-form player right now in Counter-Strike. I think Simple can still hit another level going into the major, but on current form, ZywOo is the best player. He's playing ridiculous.
Yeah, Vitality look... Sorry.
I was going to say, do you feel the same?
Yes. Well, I actually have my own theories about why Spinx is kind of falling off as well, because, yeah, he's swapping some positions, he's playing some pretty poor roles, but he's also going for, like, very high variance plays when he first joined this roster, whether it was, like, pushing through smokes or trying to go for fast flanks or go for, like, these awkward timings that actually worked a lot in the early stages, but I was suspicious that wouldn't carry forward in future games, because people would then watch demos, see what his tendencies are, and look at what kind of variance plays he was comfortable with. Because you see teams actually like stop and freeze if Spinx isn't dead and they're taking his bomb site, if there's like a smoke or a Molotov down, because they're expecting him to do something around that piece of utility. So I am scared for Vitality, because I do think Spinx was definitely like an overrated player to some degree joining this roster. He's definitely an upgrade over the player that he replaces. You know, like Masuta probably wasn't ready for tier 1 for a long time. Spinx is ready, but it is going to take a longer period of time before they are actual championship contenders in my book.
The interesting thing with that point, just quickly, is that he was like the main man on ENCE. So it would make sense that he would make a lot of plays on that team. But I think you're right. With the positions he's put in this roster, he's put in a lot of positions where I don't think he can make plays, weirdly enough. So that makes sense to me as to maybe why he hasn't been able to hit the same level.
I want to now talk about a team that I'm quite sensitive about, because I'm actually a bit of a fan. So I feel like I can't have an opinion on this because I'll be talking with my heart and not my brain. But I'm excited that they're going to be there, and that is Fnatic. Crims is my boy. But I'm curious, I'm probably going to get hurt with your opinions, but I mean, Hawker, how do we feel about Fnatic and their chances here on the challenger stage?
I feel like a lot of us might be biased towards Fnatic for different reasons, because I love Mezzy personally, and watching him come up through the UK scene. I remember casting this guy at UK LANs, and he was by far the best player there, and he somehow wouldn't win the tournament every time, and I'd be sad for him. But now he's managed to move up the ranks, and he gets to play for an actual good team. So that's nice for him. And the nice thing with Fnatic is they literally have no bad players on this roster. Every player is good, including Mezzy, who's the IGL and who puts up very good numbers. I actually think they probably do make it through here, for me at least. They do, again, have quite a few inexperienced players, but Roy is really good as a playmaker. I'm still waiting for the one player to step up as Fasha, and I'm happy to give him a bit of time on this team. But I think in terms of raw skill, Fasha might have the most potential on this team, and I don't think he's showing that yet. But I think long-term, he could be the standout that you would want to watch out for. So far, though, it has been Roy, who's been really good. And I just feel like they just have such a well-rounded roster that they should be able to have a good chance of making it through here.
B-Dog? I mean, everyone else is quiet. I'm like, I want everyone just to...
Well, no, I didn't want to
like,
end up talking over each other again, you know? So that was why.
I'm also waiting.
Well, I'm in a similar view to Hawker. I feel like Fnatic have actually got a very good chance of making it through. And one thing that I kind of spotted in the RMRs, we actually spoke to Mezzy about it during, was the fact that especially on Overpass and some other maps, the way that they kind of lay out their orientation and their structure, especially on the CT side, is they coincidentally just have Mezzy and Crims playing on one bomb site, Roy and Nikodos playing on the other, and then you've got Fasha who can be loose to rotate. So you've now got these little pairings that they're used to playing with because they got the chemistry from Copenhagen Flames and previous iterations of Fnatic, and that can just work out very well. And you've naturally got this defense that can be very rock solid. And I agree with what Hawk was saying about Fasher. I feel like he's got a very high skill ceiling, and he's going to take him. I feel like he needs just a little bit more time because he is showing and he is being consistent. I feel like he's being consistent, but I feel like he can take maybe the next step up to kind of be one of the more star players on this roster because he's definitely got the firepower and the ceiling to do so.
Also, I'll just add on, that you're talking about Messi at UK Lands, Hawker. You were saying like, oh yeah, watching this guy dominate. He was doing that all while part-time as well, back when he was actually competing in UK Lands. He wasn't even a full-time player, and all of his opponents probably were. So yeah, no, it's a good. I think these are good signs for Fnatic. I'd actually compare them a lot to Gamer Legion in terms of like where I place them in this tournament bracket, because I think one of those two squads makes it through. I think that level wise they can probably hit about the same ceiling. I think the ceiling is maybe a little bit higher for Fnatic, but in terms of the teams that they'd be able to beat, I'd compare the two a lot together.
Does anyone want to have any quick thoughts on the Messi in-game leadership angle? Does anyone have any strong thoughts on that?
I think it's like I think what Gamer Legion actually did like a video for how they performed at the RMR, like behind the scenes, yada yada. Like, look at all this content we have, and I actually saw Shui's in-game leading was basically just like, be proactive, guys, be confident in your duels, just keep on making your plays. I actually feel like that's very much what Messi is doing, with maybe a little bit more framework adjusted around it. There probably is framework behind the Gamer Legion system as well. That's probably just like encouraging words before a game from Shui, to be honest. But I do think that Messi's style is a little looser because you do have like pretty proactive players like Fasher, Roy, and you have these pairings that can work semi-autonomously. It's more the sort of mid-gaming that needs a little adjustment.
Yeah, I would like to actually add on to that fact. I feel like over the years we've seen a few times, like the first thing that came to mind for me was, for example, Kerrigan back in Astralis, where he got kind of pushed out of the team because the team no longer had faith in him as an in-game leader. And what do you know? He turns out to be the greatest of all time, at least so far, I think this point you made is really good because I've always said that you don't actually really need a good in-game leader. You just need trust in the in-game leader, because it doesn't matter how good a tactic you have. If people don't trust it and then therefore don't follow it, it's going to be a bad plan. But you can have a bad plan that people trust and give 100% for, and then it could be a good plan, You don't always need a team to have some kind of guy who just completely outbrains the opponent, I also heard, I met up at ESL Rotterdam with Sertion, and I talked about Shui, and he said the same thing, that honestly, he doesn't think that Shui is like this super mastermind or something, but he plays super confidently. He likes to make plays, all these things. And if you give sort of that, I don't know, give off that like aura of confidence to your teammates, and you just call in a way where it's like, we do this, we do that, boom, Everyone is just like, okay, that's what we do then, and everyone follows that plan. That can be really good, even though it's not maybe the logically best choice you could have made or a super complex call. There are a lot of teams that thrive more by having the simplicity. So that was about the Messi thing, and to also grab the Fnatic thing, because I have a few thoughts. I thought it was funny, Hawk, that you should mention Fasher, because I see Fasher and Spinks as sort of the same player. A player who came from a lower level team with phenomenal mechanics, some of the best in the whole game. I already could see it when I was playing with Fasher in Lyngby Vikings, and I also tweeted about it, that this guy, I had played, with the Magisk, Plymouth, the Config, everyone of these extremely mechanically skilled players. But for me, Fasher, he was like in that top 5 of most mechanically skilled players I've ever played with. And that was before he really started making a name for himself. It's funny, though, as well, that Fasher had some sort of role clashes with Roy. As you mentioned, he's very aggressive, just like Fasher was. So now he's been moved to other roles and is not performing at the level where we expected him to be, maybe. Or maybe we did expect it because of the role clashes and we knew he was going to change. But it's sort of the same with Spinks. You have a guy, super smooth aim, phenomenal mechanics, gets a few new roles, and now is in a spot where maybe making some risks he shouldn't take, and it gives him a drop-off in performance, right? And it's funny to me that these two players are right now going through sort of the same thing at the same time when they have sort of the exact same profile, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for me, Fasher also, he's the type of guy who could really he could dominate the game, but he's not in a position to do it currently. But that's because there are so many other phenomenal players on Fnatic, as you also mentioned. They have 5 good players, and there always has to be one who takes the worst role. But these players with phenomenal mechanics. What's so interesting about having them on your team is that you literally only have to worry about their decision making. You never have to worry about them having an off day. You just have to worry about them making the right choices. And it's much easier to coach someone who has a mechanical skill level that is to a point where you only need to teach them to make the right choices. Whereas there's a lot of other players where you have to do that, and you have to also think about, they may be missing from time to time.
I want to touch on another team, Nato, that you've mentioned as well. And they're a team that I think, I've got them on my list to maybe go through, and that is Gamer Legion. I think off their RMR performance, potentially an option that people should keep on their list. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. A lot of the things we bring up now, I've made videos about already. I made a video called "The Unlosable Loss" in the major RMR, right? And it was against Spirit. I don't know if you guys caught the match, but but I think 15-11, they lose a 3-on-1, for example. And then the next round, they are 5 versus 2 or something crazy. They had a 5 versus 2 against a Deagle and a Tech9, where they're on match point, and they have like multiple match points. We saw the same thing against FaZe as well. I think it was 7 match points overall or something like that, where they should have beaten FaZe, the world's number 1 at the time. Super impressive and funny as well. You bring it up right after Fnatic, who I looked through the results, who lost to, they beat Aurora, Eternal Fire, and 1win, not the greatest teams, and they lost, for example, to Bait, like B8. Whereas then you have Gamer Legion, who took like FaZe and Spirit, these like really super solid teams to the final hurdle and should have crossed it. So yeah, I agree with you. They are a very exciting team, and they could just as well make it as they could not, in my opinion. It depends on if they can close out these must-win games.
Yeah, the interesting thing coming into the RMR for Gamer Legion was they played as a mixed team for the open qualifier. That's how this lineup was put together. They weren't even a proper lineup, really. I think they were probably like thinking about maybe playing some other stuff going forwards, depending on how it went. But they play basically as a mixed team. They go ahead and win through the qualifier, and then they play literally nothing else until the RMR, which is always super interesting because you wonder how much of their performance coming into it comes down to no one has ever seen this team play, basically. Like the last time they played before the RMR was against Benched Heroes and Smooya on like a Mirage Pug. It was so clearly a Pug if you watch that game. So that is kind of interesting. I don't know if it's going to hurt them too much, though, because they do seem like a team who prep pretty hard based on what I've heard. There was some ridiculous point that was made on, I think it was on Maui's podcast, where they claimed they printed off like literally hundreds of pages or something, or like 1,000 pages or something stupidly ridiculous. And I was sitting there thinking, there's no way you can print off that many pages and have them all be useful. But okay, you know what? It sounds like you're doing the work. That's the main thing. The big question, I guess, is obviously some of the inexperienced players. It is nice seeing Acor play really well, but yeah, like Nato was saying, even the games that they did have felt. It was really weird. It felt almost like they made the games scrappy, which I think is probably kind of what they need to do. But it did feel like a lot of the games that I was watching them play, I was like, how are they even getting into these like weird positions where they're just making their opponents uncomfortable, which was cool. I also think Imma, as I've now learned it is pronounced after I messed it up on the last podcast, is he's a super skilled player for sure. And he's been on this lineup for a while. But yeah, I think if I had to pick between whether they were making it or not, I'd probably say they just miss out. I feel like I'm going to say that about a lot of these teams, though. It's tough.
And actually, if I may, sorry to interrupt you real quick, I will say something very fast, but I think it's a little bit important, kind of. I don't know if I'm leaking some kind of, I guess it's not insider information, but I had like a meeting with Gamer Legion where I was like I had a talk with them of the potential maybe to join a team. It didn't work out in the end, which is completely fine. But one thing that I know that probably you guys don't is that they actually built the team with the idea that they didn't care about the RMR. They wanted a team that they could see long-term success with. And they just were completely open to sort of letting go of this major, not even trying for it. And they ended up putting together a team, and yeah, I don't know, now they're here. So it's just funny to me. The whole point was we will build a team that's good in the long term, but bad in the short term. And now they have short-term success. I think that's really cool.
That is such a cool story. And I think it's a really interesting one now to see how they proceed. Everyone is very agreeable in this episode, and it's concerning me. I like a little bit of drama. So let's change this up. We already know that B-Dog thinks Evil Geniuses is going to 3-0 it. But I think everyone now needs to give their opinion. Which team do you think is going to go 3-0? Yumi, we'll start with you.
Don't
say Evil Geniuses.
Realistic answer, Cloud9, actually. Cloud9. I'll just put it there because I think that team is the most consistent. They constantly get to playoffs, and then they have I think almost like a mental break. Like they don't call the same way. They make a lot of weird individual choices that they wouldn't make in previous games. Maybe because the stakes are higher, they feel like they need to do something extra. They're the team that I think are probably my shoo-ins to do it. On my pickems, I have Imperial, but that's because I'm playing the numbers game. But if I'm going for a realistic answer, Cloud9.
Safe answer versus your Pickem. There we go. We got that. B-Dog, are we sticking with Evil Geniuses?
Evil Geniuses are on my Pickem. If we go realistic answer, I actually think Fnatic have got a very good shot to 3-0 because I think they're the most. I look at the entire lineup for the challenger stage. I think they've got one of the rosters that have got 5 very good players, and I don't really see any weakness in that roster. So therefore, I think they've got the best opportunity to go 3-0.
You're my favorite now. There we go. Hawker?
Cool.
Yeah, I think I also have to say Cloud9 if I'm going to be boring, just because some of the other teams that I might want to pick, I feel like do have kind of tough opening matchups. Cloud9 Fnatic is the opening matchup, so I think Cloud9 probably win that. So I don't think I can go Fnatic, sadly. And then Imperial. So you think Imperial are getting the opening upset against Vitality, Yumi?
No, I just simply think that I needed a team that I think is going to go through, but couldn't occupy my 3-0.
I see.
I want to be right in the technical term. I picked all the right teams, but they were just in the wrong spots.
But for what it's worth, my 3-0 on my Pickem is Gamer Legion because they've got 9Z. And then I was doing the matchup simulator you can do where you see who they might go against.
Oh, you get nerdy with it. Okay.
I think there's a decent chance they get EG in their next matchup. And I'm like, okay.
Easy EG.
Okay. Hey, that means if EG beat IHC and they got Gamer Legion, maybe you could be right, B-Dog. There's a method to your madness.
It's not madness, mate.
There we go. This is what I was looking for, a little bit of banter. Nato, your 3-0 pick?
In the Pickems, I have Outsiders. And the idea is that I think they're the team who, they have a really high top level, and they also have a dog shit bottom level. So either, just keeping it real. Especially, I feel like when they get anti-stratted, it feels like, everybody could probably tell you how the match is going to play out before, the opening match for them is going to play out before we even see it, right? It's going to be a pretty passive affair with a lot of saving. And it's either that works really well or it just does not work at all. So I picked them for the numbers again. But yeah, I'm also going to go with Cloud9. I think they're going to make it 3-0.
Just to jump in on the Outsiders idea. I like Outsiders because they are probably my most comfortable 3-2 team.
Yeah, true.
Every stage of the tournament. I don't care what... About to be eliminated, Outsiders win that game most of the time somehow.
I do think I actually quite like the Outsiders pick as a sneaky 3-0 shout, just because they're just really good at making people make mistakes. And so Mao's in the opening matchup. That's a game where I feel like Mao's pressure on, they're going to make mistakes. Outsiders are just going to sit there and Exertion is going to push them and die occasionally. And then someone else is going to get a little nervous and they're going to make a push and they're going to die. That's going to happen. And then if they get the right matchups, that can absolutely work for them. Yeah, I like that little shout.
Yeah.
And there's... Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
Oh, the reason I also picked them is because I feel like if they don't go 3-0, I probably would not anyway get the 3-0 pick. but then they lose to Mouse, and then it's more likely Mouse will make it through. So it's like a double plan there because I see Mouse as being a little bit on the edge. I'm really hoping they go through, but I feel like they kind of might need the first win to do it. So it's like either I'm winning or I'm winning. I hope.
Just to kind of piggyback on the Outsiders thing, I agree with what you're saying about their level can be quite low. I feel like they really play down to their opponents. That's the narrative we were kind of like explaining when it came to ESL Challenger Rotterdam, and they won that event. They looked really good, and what I thought was interesting as well was the fact that they were actually being like quite aggressive on some of those T-sided rounds. It wasn't just sit back in the default for 15 rounds. It was, okay, we've got these really good pieces to a puzzle now. We've got Flit and we've got Fame who can like perform. Just send them out a little bit, little recon mission, see what they can achieve. And more often than not, they're actually finding some really good openers. And I feel like if Outsiders are adding this tactical element to their game where it's not just the same predictable thing, especially heading into a major cycle, like that, for me, I agree with you. Like I feel like they're 3-2. Like that is where I place them. But they'll look a lot more of a confident 3-2 pick comparatively to them just kind of just sweeping everyone. Because I don't think they will.
I will say, as like a support cast, if for your riflers, like if we're considering like, I don't know, Kicker to the I guess he is their entry fragger on some strats, like their support cast of Norbert, Fame, Jame, Flit. Like that's probably the best supportive core I've seen on any roster currently. Like in terms of just pure mechanical ceilings for these guys, their support cast is probably the best of any team in tier 1, I'd actually argue. But it is just about whether they can play a different style, because like they are playing maybe a 54% win rate strategy that they apply to every single game, but that's why every game is so close.
So for the most part, as much as we say it's open, everyone's in agreement with quite a few of the teams. So I think to close it off, and I'm hoping again that we can get some tea here, your top 8, the 8 that you think will make it through. B-Dog, let's go.
Wait, hang on. Should I open up my pick and see? Will that be easy?
I need to consult the document.
Let me
consult your documents, boys.
Consult the Pickems. All right, I've got EG 3-0. I'm sticking by it. I've got Greyhound 0-3.
Yeah.
I've got Vitality, Cloud9, Outsiders, Fnatic. Then it gets a bit spicy. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I wanted to pick one between Mouse and OG because I don't think both go through. I think OG actually have better pieces and will survive more under the pressure. They got a semi-finalist in there in Dexter. So I've gone for OG. I put Furia and I put Imperial because I need some Brazilians in my Pickems. So
yeah,
that's what I've got.
Hawker, how about you?
Yeah, I've got Vitality, Cloud9. I'm just going to go through the teams that I think are actually going to make it through instead of going for my my Gamer Legion 3-0 pick. So I got Vitality, Cloud9. Outsiders, Furia, Mouse, OG, Fnatic, and then I have one more. And do I say Imperial? Do I say Imperial? I think I say Imperial. I think I actually do. I actually think they make it. I don't know. I just think their players are in the level of form where I can actually believe in them. I'm doing it. I can't believe I've done it. I've said Imperial.
You've said Imperial. Now you can't take it back. Yumi?
Yeah, I hate that I also have Imperial here because I'm not really. I'm not really
like
thinking
having
with
Imperial. Apparently,
I'm not thinking with my head here for this one. Like I am fully on the angle of like if they're in a 2-2 game or a 1-2 game and they're playing whoever, I don't know, could be Bad News Eagles, could be Fnatic, could be even Cloud9. Any team that goes against them in that round, where there's a crowd in front, like these guys are going to be scared shitless. And we saw that in previous majors. I think that Imperial will start the tournament poor. They will start with like 0-1, 0-2, and then they'll just claw their way back into it. So I don't believe in my own 3-0 pick here. But I have Imperial, OG, Vitality, Cloud9, Outsiders, Furia, Gamer Legion, and Fnatic. Because I actually believe in all these international rosters.
I think that the Imperial one it's the decision with your heart, right? I mean, even during the RMR, like my head said to me, Complexity should win it, but your heart wanted Imperial. We all want Fallen at the Rio Major, right? So I feel like everyone's kind of rooting for Imperial, but it is the heart pick. I'm not 100% convinced it's a head pick. Nato, I'd be curious, Is Imperial on your top 8 as well?
Well, I have picked one team I always pick. As a Danish guy, I picked Astralis to go through, of course.
That worked out well for you.
No. In actuality, I've gone for the two safe ones that I think everyone had, Vitality, Cloud9. I've also decided to go with Furia because I think with the recent form, I think they're good enough. I have picked Mouse as well, but I think it's a little bit yeesh. The same with Fnatic. I have Outsiders to go through as well, and then I have the last two, which I guess the ones that we all have like a little bit different. I have picked OG because I feel like I don't know. I just feel like on paper they have a team like man to man that is strong enough to make it, and I think that might. I have a feeling that will overcome a like maybe not a Gamer Legion, but like an IHC, a Greyhound consistently. You know, I think the matchups that they get where it's against a worse team, I expect them to win just because man to man I think they're better. And then the last team I have taken Big, even though they're playing with a guy basically from the Academy League. But I just feel like Big historically do well at majors, and I think actually the results have not been looking bad. But yeah, I think I'm the only guy who has Big to go through, right?
Yeah, Big are even in it.
Yeah, I mean,
come on, man.
I'm just a bit scared for their firepower. Like, if Tabson and Searson don't frag, it's like, oh no. Yeah. But they have been fragging recently, so maybe it works.
I'm curious, based on your picks. I mean, we've put the hard picks in, and we've mentioned Furia, but are we thinking the Brazilian teams sort of fade away as this major continues, Hawker?
Yeah, I think so. I think the problem with Furia is it's a shame. They feel like a bit of a known quantity to me at this point. Like, I feel like I know what I'm going to get with Furia. They'll play their style of play. They'll beat some teams, and then their style just isn't consistent enough to win events. And it is a shame because Kei Serato is incredible as a rifler. Safe actually played really well at the RMR too, which was nice because it felt like for a long time he hasn't been able to fit in as the AWPer on this team. And Art also did well, but I feel like Art is going to farm in like the NA RMR. He's just going to do really well in that sort of position. That they just feel like a team who's had a core for a while, and they're always going to be a good team, but I don't know if they're ever really going to be able to go on that full-on run. Like, best case scenario for Furia for me, I could see them maybe making like a quarterfinal. I think that's the best they can do.
B-Dog, not expecting the Brazilians to take it home at home?
No, I don't think so. I feel like I really just kind of echo Hawker's sentiments. It's like I feel like out of all the Brazilian teams, Furia's got the potential to go the furthest just because they have done previously with the track record. And although Imperial is kind of quote unquote their last dance, I mean, especially with this Rio Major, I just cannot see them even making playoffs.
And listen, nobody's going to be talking about French squads at the Blast Paris Major. So I don't think we should really be talking about Brazilian squads winning this major just because they've maybe won majors in the past. Like, their time has passed, unfortunately. And they don't even have to make the Legend stage. A lot of them are in the show match, so they'll be on the stage at some point or another. That is the contingency that ESL themselves. Sweden probably might win that too. So that's the contingency ESL have put themselves to make sure that these guys make it onto the stage.
Sweden can't win that show match. Actually, tragic.
I mean, Yumi, you're coming with the fighting talk, but I was like, have you met Brazilian fans? I mean, if they don't have that Brazilian team somewhere, I don't know if they'll even pitch up in the stadium. I think that they'll riot. That was when Imperial was about to lose to Complexity. I was like, if Complexity wins, they can't go to Brazil. They can't. Someone will. I was very concerned about them, but I mean, I hear what you're saying. I do think it's exciting for the Brazilian crowd. I'm coming from a smaller region myself. There's a certain amount of national pride that you have, but regardless of what happens, I think this is going to be really, really interesting. Obviously, the entire roundtable has now given their thoughts. We'll reconvene to see how it goes. But we'd love to know if you agree or disagree. Maybe you have your own opinion. Why don't you interact with Pinnacle here on their social media, comments on the video as well. Let us know what you're thinking. And gents, you've now put it all out there. We've got it all written down. We will, like I said, reconvene, check how this goes, and chat a little bit more when we move to the legend stage. Thanks so much for all your insights, and we'll be back soon with another episode.